All right, we're gonna get started on a conversation about Mendix and using it with industrial edge in factory automation. We have two folks here, Lucas and Thomas, and I am G. Brooks Sack from Outlier Automation. Could you just start off and tell us about what these products are and how they fit together?
I'm Lucas, product owner for Industrial Edge. What we are actually doing is to bring the Mendix capabilities, so our local platform capabilities, down to the shop floor to really fulfill industrial use cases, right? So to really give people with extensive domain know-how the chance of developing their own applications and run it down to the shop floor next to PLCs, next to robots, where the data is actually produced in our OT world. That's quite cool, and we have integrated our two platforms with a Industrial Edge plugin for Mendix, which you can get for free in the Mendix marketplace. You just download the plugin. This actually helps you to package your Mendix application, push it to Industrial Edge, and run it for shop floor use cases.
So, what are some of those use cases? Why would end users need to have a custom application and on the edge right on the shop floor?
First of all, Mendix is a toolbox. It's not limited to any use case per se, so you can do whatever you want. When does it come in handy? With Industrial Edge, we provide a large variety of applications. Basically off-the-shelf applications, and some of them connectivity solutions, so basically commodities. If you have a domain know-how, and you want to put this into an application because it gives you a competitive advantage or because it's simply not available on the marketplace. If you could ask somebody for that application, maybe then it's not a competitive advantage in the first place. If you want to have this knowledge and if you want to have that competitive advantage, you have to build it yourself. Then Mendix is the easiest way to harness this value quickly. What most of our customers at the moment realize, and just to get back to your question, for use cases is predictive maintenance, for instance. Yeah, if you're a machine builder, and we have to separate a little bit the machine builder and the end manufacturer case. For end manufacturer, it's always about overall equipment efficiency, reducing downtimes. Yeah, so they are tracking the processes of their production and see if there's outliers, if there's processes happening within the threshold, so they can determine if the process is well tuned, detect anomalies, and of course energy consumption. And for machine builders, it's more around predictive maintenance, depending on the value of the machine. This is a real benefit. They can ship them again to their customers.
Maybe in addition to that, so the cool thing with Mendix is that you develop your application with all the beauty of no-code, right? Drag and drop components, graphical development, and so on. Quick app development, and in the end, the use case decide where you deploy the application, right? So either in the cloud, if you want to interact with different users, different factories, for example, suppliers, whatever. Or if it comes to shop floor use cases, which Thomas mentioned, then you can also deploy it in the edge, really in the edge of the cloud, right?
How would you actually define edge, and why is this important within the shop floor? Why can't we just do this in the cloud? Why do we need this extra piece?
So first of all, Industrial Edge helps you to manage these devices where all these applications run centrally in the entire factory. Technically, for a proof of concept, you could always have one standalone IPC with the software running on it, but that doesn't give you any margin. That doesn't give you any advantage if you want to scale it up. Because at some point, you will have different versions of different applications with different ages of hardware. You will have it in the factory, and then maintenance becomes hell. So this is when Industrial Edge comes in. Why don't you do it in the cloud? Technically, you can do many of these use cases in the cloud, but when in industry, it's always about real-time capability. You might just simply not have the bandwidth from an internet connection point of view to actually pump that data into the cloud and pre-process it there. And even if you can, it will cost you. So our saying is always, there's no cloud, there's just somebody else's computer, and you will have to pay for it. So if you fund the data, especially in an industry environment, we're not talking about setting the temperature 5 times a day and send it to, this is basically consumer grade. But in industry grade, you have various access motors, and they create milliseconds and if not nanosecond data points. If you pump that to the cloud, it will cost you. And last but not least, security is an issue. If you're a pharma company, you might not want to refrain from pumping data into the cloud because this is literally your recipe. This is what makes you strong.
And to underline this vast amount of data, we have a factory, Siemens factory in Amberg, and this is highly automated, right? This factory produces every month a data volume of 2,000 terabyte. Just a data volume of 2,000 terabyte, just production line data, OT data. And this is basically just a metaphor. It's like 500,000 Netflix movies every month. If you push that into the cloud, you probably will be there one day and you're gone as a company.
Throughput, cost of your local resources, right? Like this industrial edge is their customers are having that IT infrastructure on premise. Is that the general idea then?
So we have different layers with Industrial Edge, right? So for global companies, enterprises, we start with a global registry. If you purchase edge applications from the marketplace, they will end up in a global registry hosted by Siemens in the cloud. From there, you can push these applications down to your factory IT layer, where the app development, app management part is, and device management, so fleet management. This can run either on premise, on a IT server, Kubernetes cluster, whatever, or also as a service in the cloud. Then the devices, of course, run next to the shop floor or on the shop floor next to PLCs, and there's really the execution of the applications.
So just to put it into like some more realistic terms, so if someone might not know what edge is, what are use cases of devices? You just said PLCs. What other things might be a device that you might want to push to?
A PLC technically is an asset, an asset that generates data. And in the industrial edge terms, a device would be an IPC, industrial PC. Some devices have computational power that can run those applications. Yeah? And they come, of course, in various forms and sizes, from very small computers to very large, powerful GPU supported IPCs that can be fitted into a rack. So there's all sorts of different sorts and kinds. What Lucas was emphasizing on, I think that's a really important point, is that we have these three layers for a reason, right? Because nobody would accept us having a device that's connected to the automation layer directly speaking to the cloud. It's a no-go. Yeah? And this, especially if you close the loop and play also commands back into the automation. Yeah? This won't fly. Yeah? And therefore we have this three-layer approach where we say, hey, you can run the management system in the cloud if you will. If you don't like it, you can disconnect it from the cloud. Yeah? For example, just open it once a month to get some new updates, then you close it again in a DMZ, and then you choose when a new update is being rolled out on a certain device, because you have full control of your fleet, so to speak.
Got it. So in this case, the PLC is basically parallel to PCs or whatever that you're deploying to with these custom applications.
Yeah.
And you might be wanting to gather data from the PLC, doing additional computation. What are some other examples of computation that you might want to do? I know we already talked about predictive analytics. Are there some other use cases that you can pull up off the top of your head?
Especially since the last 2 or 3 years, really on the rise is energy monitoring, especially in the West, where you automate a lot because labor costs, energy costs then rise. Yeah? And this is definitely something we're going to deploy, but also looking at 2 targets. The other one is a little renewed paperless shop floor. Yeah? So everything that's today partly digitalized, I would say, because it partly is digitalized already, but it's disconnected. For example, and there's a very simple example, a machine knows when it's working. You know, you have the 3 lamps on the machine, it's spinning the other one. Or if something is wrong, the machine knows. Yeah? But instead of, it will just flicker the light and somebody will come. We can do it better. Yeah? There's a shift board. You have a shift board, maybe it's Excel, maybe it's something else, but you can actually connect these data sources. Yeah? And you can say, hey, not only that the machine needs maintenance or it has an issue, but I can also trigger a person, maybe even with a wearable, and say, hey, and not only all the people in the shift board, but actually it understands who is working today on the shift board and who's on-prem, maybe who's even closest to the shift board. Yeah? And you see, that's a paperless shop floor use case, and they go in all different sorts and sizes also. But there's a limit, right? The question is really, what's the value for you in your plant, and how far do you want to go?
Typically, we are also doing a lot of IT/OT connectivity to really pre-process data, the vast amount of data, pre-process data, dashboard, maybe some data points, temperature from the last day or whatever, in the shop floor, and then only send two different data points to the cloud, right, where we really need to see it on a higher level for plant manager or whatever, right? I would not call it a gateway use case, but actually pre-processing use case and IT/OT connectivity.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if you think about some of the keynote speakers from today and yesterday, where you have this entire circle of gathering data and integrating everything immersively, that this would be an important part of actually getting all that data into one place and then cross-connecting what the full software stack is in your business. So we have this kind of use case today. Can you talk a little bit about what the future might look like and where this product might be going?
Maybe I can start.
It's a big question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Visionary. Two things, in my point of view. So we see a lot of more use cases being realized on the edge, and like big topic AI, GPU coming, but we also see a lot of movement into the software world. So really not relying on hardware devices, but running on server racks, like running edge devices as virtual edge devices. Also moving PLCs to that, right? Running PLCs as edge applications, so virtual PLCs really. And I think that's more to come, and basically also shifting everything into a virtual stack, right?
Yeah, another one I can think of is a stronger IT/OT integration. And when we say IT integration, it doesn't end up in the factory floor, but for example, goes to your ERP system. Yeah? And I think this is such a simple use case, but you think about it, how come that you create a part, or the machine, like let's say a press, yeah? Press is a metal, yeah? A metal sheet, and it destroys it for some reason. Yeah, it was adjusted wrongly, whatever, it destroys the piece. Then it takes weeks and months even till it ends up in the ERP system, because that metal sheet might have become a car, but it never became a car. Yeah? And then you realize a quarter later that you missed your production target. Yeah? But actually at the point of the press, and the press force was applied incorrectly, the machine already knew that this part will never end up a part. Yeah? Will never end up in the ERP system as a produced product. Having this connectivity and having this speed, yeah? Without having to go through all the layers of the automation area, this is really, this will accelerate everything.
Before you change, I actually had a good example of that. So I worked on a custom MES application where that was the exact problem, where they basically redesigned their entire MES system so that you could get that data in real time. Because you can't, as you're making parts very, very quickly, you can't rely on this external system to push stuff down and pull it up. So you have to completely design it to do that real-time analysis and then end up in the right systems.
When we're talking about Mendix on Edge, maybe to bring that back, what we see at our customer side is that we include more and more people into the development process, into the OT world, right? So really also integrating OT people into software processes. Everybody can write their own applications. We democratize application development with low code, for example, and make it easy for everybody to bring or make value out of deploying applications down to the shop floor.
I think that kind of ties back to the keynote yesterday of, there's people that really know those processes well. And those people are probably retiring, or that knowledge is being lost. If you can capture that and give other people that knowledge that is very specific to your organization, then that gives you a lot more value.
So absolutely, yeah. In the end, if you run a company and the domain know-how is what makes you run that company good, yeah. And right now it's somehow captured in the people's heads, yeah. And you cannot get it out because they simply don't have the tools or the know-how to translate it into this new world, yeah, which is IT. Usually it ends up on a written note, or it ends up in an Excel file that nobody can maintain in 3 years from now. This is really the issue. Yeah, it's all about the competitive advantage and bring the horsepower, so to say, to the speed. Yeah.
And this one we also see heavily with our machine builders. We have a lot of machine builders going a digital transformation, adding additional services to their products, to their sold products. And I mean that can be easily solved with Mendix on Edge as well, because you just create a body of your code, right? Everybody can read it using graphical elements, and then you decide which end customer gets which services.
I think one of the things that stands out to me with Mendix is just like where you're starting from. So like if you're looking at like the some of the modules that are built, like the AWS IoT connections, things that if you were going to actually go out to get that repo, start setting it up, all of that stuff, it's almost like way overwhelming if you're starting from Visual Studio on Microsoft, right? If you can start to pull in those pieces and be like, okay, I can immediately get a proof of concept, that gives you the impetus to start building these things and get that value.
Absolutely, I think very important, since it's low code and we've developed this application for the first time. First of all, it's quicker. Huh? You can bank on a huge variety of predefined components. It's all local. There's no drag and drop it into your code. The cool part is that the second, third, or fourth application you're creating is created even faster. Yeah, because once you set up a domain model, for example, a data model, it's a UML diagram. Yeah? Once you've set that up for your application, and you need a similar application or a similar machine, you just copy that. Yeah? And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is really the major benefit of low code. Time to value. It's really time to value, because in the end, it's not just about saving money by being quicker, getting the competitive edge by being that first. Yeah? And we have customers, that's a standard we see today. They cut their development times from writing the requirement sheet or spec sheet till they have this application in production from 8 months to 6 weeks. This is tremendous. Yeah? We released Mendix just recently in last November in a fair. And we had an example there, and they had 8 applications made with Mendix. We met them here again at Realize Live. Now they have 15 applications in place. Yeah? So it's 7 more applications in the last 6 months. Yeah? So that should tell you.
One point on that is that if you think about like anyone who gives advice about digital transformation or Industry 4.0, they always say start with a use case where you can gain value immediately. And this is exactly in that path as a product that you can actually do that. And that's not out there not understanding it. It's like you can do it right now.
That's why we also rely on the microservice architecture, right? So we see a lot of customers starting with easy use cases like just getting data out of the assets, right? So that's the first step. Harmonizing the data, maybe make it standardized, and then the next step is to build a dashboard application or whatever, right? Show the data which you can get from the assets. Ranges up unto AI use cases. Yeah.
And I think the big difference is if you order an application, it's a made-to-order application with any IT provider, you better write that spec sheet very, very sophisticatedly, yeah? Because otherwise, garbage in, garbage out, this is what you get. And with Mendix, you start, yeah, it's a journey, it's a digital transformation journey. As Lucas said, you start with, just collecting the data. And then you dashboard, maybe for yourself, and then you talk to people and you change the dashboard, you customize it, you add the ERP connectivity. Nothing is set in stone at the beginning. And I think this gives you all the flexibility that you need.
And with Mendix, it's also quite cool that you can integrate different user groups or personas into your development process, right? So it's not only the developer coding, writing code, and then deploying the application or coming up with a new version. You can easily, so Mendix is also a platform, right? You can do DevOps integration, you can write user stories, bring that into code and co-create the application with every persona in your company. Obviously also the end user.
Yes, that is great. And going back to what you said, I'm actually a control systems integrator, and we do write custom programs, and people do that, right? But I do think that like being able to self-maintain your code, even if it is externally generated, right, is such a big part of it, because the manufacturing process is not static, and if it is static, you're probably not competitive anymore. And so that being able to do that and have your own people take it on and be able to change it and morph with the actual process as the business evolves is so important.
Just to add to this, I think Lucas already touched base on this example earlier. It doesn't mean that you start writing all the applications from now on forever. It can still be a hybrid use case where you say, hey, you develop me an application body, yeah, with Mendix, and I just customize it for my customers. We actually had that example that one of our machine builders, they ordered the application with Mendix to be created with Mendix, and it was like 80% done. And then they just adjusted the 20% for each of the different customers. And even if it's just changing the logo in the application, and they ship it with a machine and they have it customized for the customer, yeah, or they take a little bit of functionality out if the customer didn't pay for it. Yeah? And this is really supporting them to be lot size one software production. And to this other example that you mentioned, in the end, you can argue a lot about what is good software. There's a bunch of books on it. There's a lot of opinions on it, but in the end, especially, and that's the easiest example I can think of, you can argue what is a good UI. Yeah, and there's where people with UI UX expert will tell you this is good UI. You should not use these two colors together and whatnot. Yeah, I would argue the best UI is the ones that's being used. Yeah, and if you ask the person who will have to work with the machine, the operator, how should it look like for you? How should the dashboard look like? What kind of information do you need? And he tells you that is how it should look like, then you can do it. Yeah? there's no need to argue that.
Is there anything with this that we haven't covered yet that you might want to talk about?
Absolutely. I think the best part is, and Lucas already said it, Mendix Studio Pro is the IDE, the integrated development environment for Mendix and Edge, and you can just download it for free. The plugin is on the Mendix marketplace, again for free. Yeah, you can start with even Industrial Edge. You can start for free. Yeah? Even with the device, the virtual device, you have a 3-month trial. So basically, you can get started today, and all what you see and all that we present is for free. To some extent. Also the learning part, and the learning curve is really quick with Mendix in general. But you can just go to the Mendix Academy and get started with how to develop an application, how to port it to Industrial Edge, yeah? How to use Industrial Edge. And we have that all set up for you in a virtualized environment.
And the last part I could think of is that we want to build a platform around it, right? So not only want to do the technical integration here with the plugin, but we also want to make it a lot easier for Mendix developers to also be part of our Industrial Edge ecosystem. Therefore, we are currently developing modules which you can reuse to connect to existing Industrial Edge applications, like the data integration layer or to different connectors, that it can really rely on data which is already in your Industrial Edge device, that you can directly use that. I think what we also provide in the marketplace, in the Mendix marketplace for free, are like example applications, which you can download also for free to get a hands-on, try it out, try to connect to different other applications and take parts of these example applications into your code to accelerate your app development.
Thank you. Anyone that is sitting around have any questions or thoughts?
So what is the pricing model? Let's say, is that based on the number of applications I'm going to deploy on the edge device? Is there a different tiers? Can you explain that?
What we're doing with the pricing model for Mendix on Edge is that we license the Edge device itself and we scale with the memory of the device. So you have smaller devices and bigger devices, as Thomas explained. In the end, bigger devices can run more applications or stronger applications, and by that they also cost more. In the end, if you license a device, you can run as many applications as you want on it.
So you're saying you're trying to integrate two ecosystems together, right? So far, can you name one or two like the mutual ecosystem partners that are both familiar with Mendix and Mendix and Edge? And are they at Advanced Live? Can we talk to them?
I will name one from Germany, which is Clever, biggest Mendix partner also, and they got certified for Mendix and Industrial Edge, so they know both worlds. And we have recently announced also another partner in here at Realize Live. I don't know if we can say it already. Can we?
First, 2 weeks ago at Hannover Fair, we announced that Capgemini as a global GSI. Joined the Industrial Edge ecosystem, and they do have a huge local practice where majority of people is also working with Mendix, and they do have people set up for Industrial Edge, of course. And some other GSIs are following, and here in Real Estate we do have a few on the line. More than that tomorrow.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, you two.
Thank you.